Guys, you may remember our discussion on linguistic phonetics, in which we started up the discussion with the idea that the language which is accepted in a society does not exist in one single mind, right? And you may also remember the terms given by the Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, right? The ideas of langue and parole, right? The language which exists in the community, and then the individual performance, right? That's the parole, right? So when we talk about linguistic phonetics, we talk about the community, right? Something which is accepted by the community. And in this discussion, we are going to um, further highlight this difference of the linguistic phonetics, and then the community-based phonetics, and then the individual sound system, right? The individual differences, idiosyncratic differences, right? And the focus is, of course, the community phonetics, because we are concerned with community, right? Community versus individual is the discussion through which we can analyze that how the shared language, the shared properties of language are understood by the members of that community, right? But having said this, the point is that the little individual variation which does take place to the sound while production of speech, we do not cover, and maybe as a human habit, we do not focus on that individual variation, and we just take the major bulk of the information, right? The example is, like, for example, there is a mistake by a person, right? Like a slip of tongue is there, and the person is unable to pronounce a word appropriately, right? In a very standardized way. Just an example, okay? So we would take it for granted that, okay, it's the personal mistake of the person, but the person tried to say this one, right? We would just focus on one meaning, and then having in mind that specific meaning of a specific word, we would try to answer that person, right? So that's the difference between the community and individual variation, right? So within linguistic phonetics, we are concerned with the phonetics of community. And the phonetics of community is the description of a specific language community. That's the description, okay? And the example is that we use IPA, International Phonetic Association. And by all those IPA symbols, whether for consonants or for vowels, or for the small suprasegmental diacritic differences, we just take it for granted that those are community tokens. Those are community-based, realizations, which do convey specific meanings, right? And our focus is on the community-based linguistic phonetics, right? Communities' shared knowledge is very important, and that's analyzed. That's gotten by the members of community on the basis of the auditory capabilities. We listen to each other, and then we understand, and we just acquire that knowledge. So that's auditory-based activity. And then when phoneticians, when phonologists, when they try to describe that sound, they also use their auditory capabilities. And then on the basis of their auditory capabilities, they work and highlight the linguistic phonetics. The phonetics, which is the property of the community. And that's the shared knowledge, right? The shared phonetic knowledge, that's shared by the speakers and also by others. The speakers, when they communicate, the speaker and the listener, right? They communicate on the basis of that shared knowledge. And when others, like me and you, when we explore that language, when we explore the sound systems, then what do? Basically, we are also sharing that knowledge. And on the basis of our community-based knowledge, we explore it. And same is done by phoneticians and phonologists, right? So that's done on the basis of the shared phonetic knowledge. And an example is there. Like, for example, the people of English, like the English community, they know that when the per sound occurs in the beginning of a word like Pakistan, right? So the P sound is supposed to be aspirated, right? That's the shared knowledge of everyone from English community, right? Every normal being from English community, right? And they also share the idea that when that P is having S sound, when it's preceded by S, right? Then it's not supposed to be aspirated. That's the shared knowledge, right? And one more example I can give to you is that when a phrase like on top of, it is spoken in connector speech like on dopper. You see, the on is made, it is nasalized, right? And the t sound, which is voiceless, it becomes voiced, right? And the last off becomes another schwa, right? So what actually is done by the community, we understand that, okay, the person wants to say on top of. That's the shared knowledge, right? And at the same time, we do understand that on DOPA is not really a phrase in English, right? So that's the shared knowledge communication, right? That's when the communication is done on the basis of shared knowledge. And that's an important aspect of the linguistic phonetics, right? Speakers differ. When it comes to the individual characteristics, speakers differ while producing the sets of their phonetic habits. And can you imagine why this variation is created? Why this difference is created? This difference is created on the basis of differences here in the mind of the speaker. Because every individual has different vocabulary. Every individual has different linguistic exposure. Every individual has different memories, right? So the phonetic habits and the memories of the speakers, they are never identical. Even twins from the same family, they would have different memories, they would have different habits, and on the basis of that, different sounds are produced, right? So we do not cover those individual differences, and we are not focusing on individual phonetics. Our focus is on the community-based linguistic phonetics, right? The individuality may be described, right? Like the phonetic knowledge and skills, that performance. But when it comes to language as a system, right, then we are focusing on the system from community point of view, right? And the individual performance, right? The same example which I just gave in the beginning of this topic, the lang and parole differences, right? So the parole is basically the description of the phonetic knowledge and then the skills, that how it is delivered, how it is performed. That's the individual difference, right? But in order to highlight language as a sound system, and then in order to go through that linguistic phonetics, we focus on something which is coming from the community, which is shared by the community, right? And there are certain aspects which are covered in IEPA and the feature hierarchy. We'll continue with this discussion in the next session.